Welcome to a Calvinian architecture stories that I wrote 20 years ago as a response to Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities. My book, called A Calvinian Architecture, was divided up into a series of octaves, 7 of them, and each octave comprised 8 chapters. And each chapter was made up of 3 verses. The first was a translation of A Calvino Invisible City, and the second and the third were stories of either a trip I made, a journey I made somewhere in my life, or a house that I wanted to buy or live in somewhere in the world. Today I'm reading you from the 3rd octave. The keynote is Mi, the colour is yellow, and it's the first chapter, whose city is Ipazia. Verse 2. It's May 1968. I drive out from Milan in a haze. I've just bought a Fiat 600 for $100. At first it goes okay, but the motor blows up in the hills outside La Spezia in the attempt to try and keep ahead of an endless supply of monstrous semi-trailers. The next morning a new motor is installed for $20 after 2 softly spoken policemen who find us asleep on the side of the freeway tow us to a little garage outside Prato. We go on and finally get to Urbino, driving over the mist-laden Apennines. We arrive in the middle of the night and somehow we find Umberto's house in the fog. We're greeted and given a room upstairs. I have no idea where I am. I cannot even imagine it, because all I see as I peer through the window is fog. I think there's a kind of terrace outside, but nothing else is visible beyond the first metre of stone floor. I sleep and wake the next morning to the most stupendous experience of my life. It will never be, it can never be repeated. I open the doors to the terrace and before me is Urbino in all its splendour. The ducal palace, the towers, the clay walls, the roofs, the church spires, the walls, the steep approaches, the turreted ramparts, the cypresses leading up to the city, the stairways, the cupolas, the wheat fields, the olive groves, the play of light and shadow on a myriad surfaces. I'm open-mouthed. It's all I can do to just sit and look. I cannot contain what I'm seeing, simply cannot. I need time. I sit there all day and cannot be moved. Finally at dusk, I'm dragged inside, almost walking backwards. And immediately I need to return because the spectacle has begun of all the little lights in 100 kitchens being switched on to finally form the strangest, most wondrous constellation. It's a clear evening in late spring. I sit down in the chair again. Someone brings me a cup of wine. How did that wine taste? As voices drift from neighbouring farms, laughter from close by and from far away, a few muttered curses, goats' bells sound. I smell cypress trees, fresh hay, and frying artichokes in the descending evening dew. I'm 20 years old. I cannot contain any of this, I simply cannot. Just then the moon rises full, golden over the ducal palace, and illuminates me with its anima. It's at that moment that I think, I'm Italian. That's the thought that arises spontaneously as dew falls. I don't prompt it. It's so joyous, this thought, that it immediately transmutes into feeling. This understanding of the connection between the two, me and Italianness. whatever it may be, however it may manifest. This primal understanding arises with the artichoke's fragrance and the smell of the goats and the perfume of the cypress trees. I understand this for the very first time in my life. I am Italian. And for the very first time I know what this might mean. I look up at the lights of this most perfect of cities. The birthplace of Raphael and Bramante, the spiritual home of Piero della Francesca, the intellectual home of Pico della Mirandola, the chivalrous arena of Federico di Montefeltro, the complex political space that Niccolò Machiavelli used as the maquette for his inspired deconstruction of a quintessentially rinascimentale social sculpture. I continue looking up until all of the nightingales as one begin to draw in sound the perfect shape of this most perfect of cities, rising above, below, beyond me. Third octave, second chapter, Armilla, verse 3. A third floor window opens onto a balcony in Via Manzoni on this autumn day, late afternoon. It's about to start raining in the distance towards Piazza Garibaldi. I can already see fragments of coloured umbrellas. I've stopped in a doorway expecting a downpour, and I've just looked up absent-mindedly, or rather simply to check the progress of the clouds across the sky. It was then that somebody drew the curtains and revealed a red armrest, scarlet under the reading light, below a pale lemon ceiling rose. The sky darkened so quickly above us that the streetlights flickered on. All at once I was then transported up there into that room, living that life each afternoon, looking down into Via Manzoni from that balcony, perhaps coming down into the street just here, just now, to meet you. And on looking up, I saw the darkening sky. I saw all that, just that, all that, all this. So I look forward to meeting you tomorrow to read you 2 stories from the third octave, the third chapter. Keynote, me, colour yellow. City is Chloe. Until then.